Welcome to the Gigless Podcast, a podcast showcasing the works and talents of those who lost their gigs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This podcast features a range of creatives in the tri-state area who are young visionaries and who contribute to their craft despite the recent events that have happened. Join us today as our host Remi L speaks with Daniel Tineo, a young and up-and-coming multi-instrumentalist, singer, and producer who has worked with various artists and projects. In this episode, Daniel discusses his work as a teacher, his unique and practical outlook on music, as well as sharing his experiences as a professional musician while navigating through the music world. Daniel will also share his journey of going back to his basics as a musician, his insight of live shows, as well as his future plans. You can hear more about him and his projects in the show notes of this episode. Thank you.
So, welcome back to the latest episode of the Gigless Podcast. I'm your host, Remi L, and today our guest is DGT Music,
Hello.
better known as Daniel Tineo.
Yeah, that is me. Hello.
What does the G stand for?
So, the G is actually my middle name. It's Guillermo, which is my dad's name. So, it's a very Dominican name, Daniel Guillermo Tineo. But it also just happened to be the DGT is kind of like a double meaning because a lot of the stuff I would do for like music production is digital and shorthand is DGT. So it just so happened to be that my initials fit with what I was doing. So easy marketing.
Fun. So it's all on brand. Very happy. My LLC that I do social media management and graphic design and web design through is literally RCL Media. So it is what it is.
Very straightforward.
Yes. So let's just jump into the weeds here. You have had a couple of outdoor shows this summer and early spring. And when the time that we're recording this, it's early August of 2021. So tell our audience, what has that been like for you to return to the stage?
Well, the term stage has become very loose. There's been all sorts of interesting venues we've been to since then. We've gone to play at a place called Claremont Distillery, which has been probably one of the coolest places we've been to. It's just like a giant warehouse with a bunch of like alcohol barrels behind you. It's a really cool layout. But it was definitely interesting getting back into playing live shows. I spent a lot of time before that doing a lot of like pre-recording stuff and doing like those, the typical quarantine videos that people were putting out with bands and performances. So it was a lot of Brady Bunch stuff. So it was very a bittersweet experience getting to play live again. It was a lot smaller at first. There was not a lot of people showing up to shows, but it was perfectly understandable given everything going on. But we've seen throughout each performance that like more and more people show up, and as more people get vaccinated as well, we've seen more and more of a turnout. For example, our last show we played at the Boulevard Bar and Grill in it was Elmwood Park. The finger snaps in there. Sorry, Dane. But we played at the Boulevard Bar and Grill, and it was pretty much like a packed. It's a very small house, but it was a packed one. And it was a great show. We played a lot of classics and a lot of new songs and some originals as well, and everyone was enjoying it. It's nice to have the feeling of live shows be back.
Right. So, you play shows. Do you do it solo or with a band?
It's been with a band. I play with I play as part of this band, but it is kind of one of my babies. It's called Ginny Lackey in the Hi-Fi band. So Ginny Lackey's our lead singer, and we are the Hi-Fi band. So that's who we've been. That's who I've been playing with for uh most of this time.
Right. So you've been playing with bands. I know that you work full time as a studio artist, right? Like a studio production artist. Am I correct on that?
Um, I would just say musician.
There you go.
Yeah, there's multiple facets that result in me being a full-time uh musician. So the primary thing is teaching, and then I do studio production stuff and uh working with some I've had the blessing of and pleasure of working with some pretty big people currently. So
Can you say who those pretty big people are right now? Are you under an NDA?
no, it is not an NDA at all. As a matter
Okay.
of fact, he's on my Instagram taking pictures of him. He's posted me taking pictures of him. It's Wyclef Jean. Uh, one of my heroes. I grew up on hip hop culture, so the Fugees are high up there for me. But also, uh, his producing work is part of the reason why I do music in the first place, because I'm a huge fan of Santana, and Santana is the reason why I play guitar. And Supernatural was that first record that I listened to, and I went, "Oh my god, I want to do that." That sound is what I want to do. You also don't get to see a lot of well, now it's more common, but back then when I was little, it wasn't very common to see uh a man of Hispanic and Latin descent doing rock and blues and fusing his culture with those things together. So,
Absolutely. I totally understand that. There's, especially now that people can be more DIY, I feel like there's definitely that has diversified a lot of the music industry and a lot of different industries across the board, because now more people have access to things, especially to creating their own things and producing. So I think that right now, like, that's just a great story that you're able to work with one of the people that inspired you to even begin your musical journey and your career, like as a kid. That's like, you are living the full 360, like, dream job right there.
yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I haven't told him this. Uh but I was working on some personal projects, finishing up a solo record with some songs I wrote, and I was working on it and I kind of hit a rut, but I was getting through it, and then this opportunity to work with him came up, and like without hesitation, one of the only free days that I had to work on this personal project, I pretty much gave it up to do this. And a lot of my friends were like, why would you do that? That's like the time that you had, the very little time you had to work on your personal project. Why would you do that? And I was like, listen, you don't get a lot of opportunities to work with one of your heroes. I was like, for me, I don't regret this at all, because to it's almost re-inspiring getting to go full circle, and work with someone who inspired you to create music. It's almost like uh it's one of those things where I'm so glad I'm doing it now, because I'm getting back into working on my personal projects, and there's like this new fire and energy that I have towards working on my new stuff, because I was like reconnected with my roots.
That's awesome. I feel like that will just bring you so much more inspiration, especially like as a creative person, when you're able to reconnect with your roots and find that source of inspiration and like just tapping into that inner child.
Oh yeah. I still every time I go into work, I nerd out. Like it's very hard not to. I'm very I'm very focused on my job and getting the work done, but at the same time, I'm like having the time of my life, even in the most mundane things. It's just like every time he says something or gives me like a nugget of wisdom or knowledge, it's just like writing it down, recording everything, because you don't want to miss anything.
I think that's awesome. Like that you're just learning to learn from someone that inspired you. I think like I could just run in circles all day with that. So, you know, to transition to the next question, what is one of the things that the pandemic has taught you in the recent months, especially like as we've been in this quote unquote like reopening process here in the tri-state area?
Um, I think for me, a lot of my learning experience from this whole quarantine period uh has been the idea, or this like ongoing theme of going back to basics, uh and expanding the comfort zone. I think be, given everything that happened, it's like a lot of people were forced out of their comfort zones, and so it's like you either let the tide drown you or you learn to swim, you know. uh and granted, a couple times I felt like I kind of drowned a little bit, but you know, I always try to reach back to the surface and start swimming again. um I spent a lot of time trying to, you know, you could talk about like, oh, expanding the comfort zone, like what does that mean? And I feel like that the comfort zone is a different thing for everyone, but for me it was a lot of just like I spent a lot of time focusing on, mental health and like expanding my knowledge, but also working on why my brain works the way it does. Uh, but also, once I reach that point of like, I feel like I'm as mentally sharp as I can be right now, I went back to focusing on, but not forgetting mental, sharpness, but also focusing on physical sharpness. And so I spent a lot of time uh going for walks, and uh now
I
doing
saw that.
7
I've been
miles a
seeing that.
day.
7 miles a day. Let's go.
It's a great way to, as you're sharpening the body, you also in many ways get to sharpen the mind. Been listening to a lot of podcasts, specifically this one as well. So
Hey.
I've been going for walks, and as I'm going for these walks, kind of reflecting on things and like listening to podcasts, learning new things, and just trying to become the best version of myself. But in terms of being a creative and that aspect of uh this whole quarantine experience, it's been uh a really kind of refreshing time for me. I didn't quite hit the like I didn't quite have the super heavy impact of like losing all like avenues of income when everything happened. I got to teach online. I was doing a lot of production stuff for the church I go to. Uh, so I stayed busy pretty much during the entire quarantine. Uh, but yeah, I got to like go back to basics and really figure things out for myself from as a creative and as just a person in general. And as I learned more about myself, I it helped with my creative process as well.
Exactly. I think one of the best things that anybody who is creative or freelancing or just in charge of their own day or their own schedules, I think that the number one thing is to exercise. And you've actually inspired me to exercise during my workday. So
Hey,
I have an elliptical in my basement, and I definitely use it now on work on my lunch breaks. I've just started this like the other day, but on my lunch breaks now, which are like only like 30 minutes, I just practically use the elliptical throughout the whole thing, and it helps me get ready for whatever class that I take that night, whether it be taekwondo or yoga. It stops like since I've been doing it, I've realized that I'm not as tense, especially in my lower back, because that's one of the problems that we have is like you sit down for like 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day, whatever your schedule is. But then when you go and be active, like you are more at risk for flare-ups and all this stuff, because your body was like, hey, we're doing nothing and now we're doing everything. So you've definitely inspired me to do that.
It's You're not the first person who's told me that, and I just post it. The funny thing is I post that stuff not just to get like a pat on the back and whatever. Like a lot of people do stuff like that to like get the affirmation or like, get the pat on the back, the praise, whatever. For me, I was doing it to hold myself accountable. I was like, if I'm posting this every day, that means someone is seeing it and knowing that I'm walking every day. So I can't slack because someone knows that I'm going out for my walks every day. I got to make sure I do it. It was
Oh
very
yeah.
much like throwing myself, in the deep end just to make sure I do it.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of accountability with it all. And I think that, just keeping up your health, especially as a creative person, is just so important because it helps you think more. Two, your brain is actually like more susceptible to like creative thoughts and ideas in that downtime, I feel. And also, like, you are able to take inspiration from the world around you because you're going to be in a different environment that you wouldn't necessarily be in, like either out on a walk like you, or at the gym, or there's different ways to take inspiration from that. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, like for example, on my walks, like I basically plan my walk that basically go through like three or four different towns, because after a while of doing 7 miles in little old Richfield, you get to see the same tree over and over again, and after a while, that tree gets a little boring. Here and there, you notice some very small details that you didn't notice like the 15th time. But yeah, I get to go through like the three or four surrounding towns, and you get to see like almost this giant shift in cultures that happen as you go through each town, and you notice all these different experiences in each spot, and it's very eye-opening because you're sometimes when you are very much in your own little bubble, you're like kind of closed off to other like experiences, other ideas, and like just different perspectives as well. So it's been a very refreshing experience to go for these little walks. I say little, but 7 miles is not little.
That is not little, especially when you're dealing with like hills and valleys and all and going up and going down. I understand that.
Yes.
So let's transition into so currently it's the first week of August. Lollapalooza has just happened in Chicago. Big giant musical event, one of the biggest concerts of the year post quarantine ending.
Yes.
And there's a bunch of other music festivals that are just as big going on. And right now, the governor of New York has just announced that in order to go into restaurants and gyms or to do like indoor activities now, you're going to have to have a vaccine ID present. And this has been happening a lot with a lot of colleges across the country. For us locally, Rutgers is mandating that everybody on campus be vaccinated. If you're stepping foot on campus, you have to have a vaccination ID. So there's a lot of talk right now about and push for everybody to be vaccinated. A week or two ago, New York City's Broadway announced that everybody that works on Broadway must be vaccinated in order to perform or work there. And I just want to ask you, as a musician who has gone out into the world and has performed, how do you feel about these mandates? And then I'm going to give my opinion.
So I'm all just to clarify, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who is vaccinated, and is constantly or at least for the most part, a lot of my work revolves around being in large amounts of people amongst, a good amount of people. So with all that being said, I am very much pro uh showing proof of vaccination. Uh because I've personally seen that when the mandate of having the masks was removed if you're fully vaccinated, uh a lot of people were asking like, "Oh, how do you prove that you're vaccinated and not wearing a mask?" Right? And we very much saw that people who were not vaccinated didn't care that they weren't vaccinated and were like, "Oh, well the mandate is lifted, so let's just not wear a mask." And so it's that, a lot of it was put up to integrity, you know.
Right.
Uh but as we've learned, people don't always have the highest of integrity.
They don't have
So
integrity. Integrity
they don't
Farm.
they don't have integrity. And
Integrity
so
Farms.
uh for me, as someone who is, and as someone who has an older person in my house, I very much care about the safety of others. uh for example, at my work, the we have private
Which one?
instructors. Guitar Center. Yeah, that
Okay.
the reality of being a musician. Which job?
Yes.
At Guitar Center LLC, Paramus, New Jersey. We for the online, well, not online lessons. Online lessons, obviously, we don't have to wear a mask because I'm in my house and they're in theirs. But for the in-person lessons, even if you're fully vaccinated and both parties are vaccinated, we're still required to wear a mask because we are, even though 6 feet apart, because we're on opposite sides of the room, it's still a small room. And so, for safety reasons, not everyone can get vaccinated because obviously we teach a lot of kids as well. So, uh, because of the close proximity and things, we still have to wear a mask. It's just the way to keep things really safe in there. Uh, but outside of that, we can take off the mask. I don't like to be too close to people, anyways, unless I know who they are and that they are someone who also keeps himself pretty safe. During the whole, uh, you know, height of the quarantine, uh, I kept myself pretty much around my family and like two close friends who I knew like they didn't go anywhere else. So when we hung out, we didn't always wear our masks, but that was mostly because we always ate together. Uh, but even then, it's like you've only been home, and then we go out to get Wendy's through drive-through, and then we're and then we're in our car. Uh, but
And here's, oh, go ahead.
oh, uh, but with everything else, I think holding people accountable and safety is of the utmost importance. If you are if you want to go to these indoor events or concerts and stuff, you should be willing to do everything you can to you know be safe. you know um I think it's a lot of like people want all the kind of benefits without any of the consequences, or
Right.
or responsibilities that come with doing the fun things.
Right. And
So
I want to add this, and I want to interject on this because this is very important too. A lot of people do not have health insurance, or they do not have the level of health insurance that it would take to get the level of medical care needed to treat COVID-19
yeah.
in a hospital setting. Because when we're talking about, like, if we use Broadway as an example, right? A lot of those people are contracted. A lot of those people do not have year-round health insurance. A lot of those people, like, there are just so many different risk factors when it comes to putting on the show. Nonetheless, like, equipment dropping on you, or like a piano coming through the ceiling or whatnot.
Or a stunt gone wrong. Yeah.
Or a stunt gone wrong, or you inhaling too much smoke from the smoke machine. If you have like asthma, I know they take that into account now. Like, there's so much done in the background of casting, and there's so many health issues that get taken into account when running and creating a show, especially a Broadway play. And I think that it's just like mutual respect. You're coming to support the artists, support them in just every way that you can, and not only support the people that you're going to go and see, but the people around you as well. But for a lot of people that work in these industries, they're going to the doctor is not always an option. Going back to the vaccines, keeping yourself safe and keeping those around you safe. You don't know what people's personal lives are like. You don't know if they have access to a doctor, if they have a primary care physician, if they can even, afford that kind of help. And especially people that are in the creative industry that are all contractors. When you go on tour, that's when you make money as a musician primarily, correct?
Yes.
Coughs. But the whole point that I'm trying to say here is that people in the creative industries are not as affluent as society, especially mainstream society, like mainstream music wants you to think that they are. And it is a huge risk and bill to pay when you have to, and who knows if that short-term contract, if the health insurance that you get from that is even going to cover the cost of a COVID ward bed.
Yeah. I was actually just talking with my sister recently about this whole thing about,
Hi, Emily.
wherever she is. We're talking about the whole like getting the vaccine versus not getting the vaccine and people who are against it. And you see people talk about like, oh, people who are vaccinated still can get it. So does it really work? And I'm like, well, if you look at like the flu vaccine, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're not going to get it at all. There are people who still get the flu after getting vaccinated from the flu vaccine, but those that get the vaccine and get the flu have a much better chance of getting through it than someone who is unvaccinated, and we talked about, we kind of brought up the analogy of like a boxing match, right? It's like, okay, you survive COVID, right? So you survive this boxing match, right? But you win the fight, but you get absolutely rocked. Like the guy has, you come out of the fight, you beat the other guy, you won, but you got a broken nose, you got a collapsed lung, you are bruised up all over, your ears bleeding,
You're out for the season.
You are completely out. Like there's no going back for this season. You're out for the count. You won the fight, but at what cost, right? Versus getting the vaccine where it's kind of like, okay, I fought this dude before, I know his move set, and you win the fight, but instead of coming out like basically half dead, you come out with, a couple scratches, a couple bruises here and there, and maybe some, maybe a slight, sprained ankle or wrist, but you're back within, 2 to 3 weeks.
That's an excellent analogy.
It's all about recovery time. It's like the amount of damage that COVID does to someone that is vaccinated is way less than someone who's unvaccinated.
And all the people, so I am in my mid-20s, all of the people who got COVID-19 back when it was like the height of the pandemic that were in their mid-20s, all the people that I saw on the news were like all young, just young people like you and me. And they got, like you said, they got completely rocked. This one girl used to go on like 10-mile runs every like day or something like that. Like she was a college athlete. She's completely done. Her career is over. I just remember watching that on the news and just being like, that is devastating. And I can only imagine what it would be like to be a musician, to be someone who, or a performer at a show, and, find out that, someone, that you got it by playing a show, or that you got it while on tour. And it's just like, it's just so hard because it's an illness that attacks so many different parts of the body, especially the lungs. That's like the biggest thing in all across all the cases. And, for me, like, I'm at that point where it's just like, listen, like, I understand it. You don't want to be vaccinated, fine, but don't go to these spaces where all these other people that don't necessarily have access to the best and greatest healthcare are having to, work because they have to work.
Yeah. For me, it's the idea that, if you want to do these things, they're like, let's say you want to go to a concert, right? There are certain requirements that you have, like, depending on the venue, right? So like, I know that certain bar gigs are like Irving Plaza, right? It's like you have to be 21 plus to go there. You have to, obviously pay your ticket fare, and you have to have proof of ID. Like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, I'm 21. They're like, we need ID to make sure,
Right.
because we want to hold you accountable, right? It's like, I think of this as just a new requirement. You have to be fully vaccinated, or at least I know that some places it's like you have had to at least had your first shot, and proof of, that you don't have it, that you don't have COVID. Like, for example, uh I had the pleasure of going to my boss Wyclef's 4th of July bash, and he's very much like, he's probably the most careful guy I've seen when it comes to like throwing a party. Some people, they just throw a party and it's whatever, right? But he was like, okay, you need proof of vaccination, and for the first hour, anyone who shows up can get tested on the spot if you haven't gotten tested. So it's like, if you come after that hour and you don't have a vaccination card or uh proof of not having COVID, sorry, you can't come. I don't care if I invited you. If you can't show those things, too bad. Right?
Yeah, and that's in a space that's full of, you know, that's a space full of affluent musicians, and the fact that that level of consideration is being used is like, and applied, is, I think that it's just very considerate. I think that it's just at this point, it's just about respecting one another. I view it like this. A lot of the people that I've hung out with, they're all vaccinated. Everyone that I have encountered over the last few days and stuff had some fears going into it, but they quickly, like, they had to get it because of family members, or they saw someone pass away that was their age, and it kind of shook them up to go and get it. And I just think at this point, like, if you're going to go to a concert, it's like Daniel said, it's just the part of the courtesy call at this point.
Mm-hmm. Like, for me, I think even the idea of like proving that having a positive COVID test or negative, I don't know how you, is it positive or is it negative? I forget.
Negative is good, positive is bad. Positive is that you have to go to you have to go to the doctor and see what they tell you to do next, depending on the severity of your symptoms.
But coming back with a test that says you don't have COVID, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Negative. Okay.
You know, for me, I'm like, if you're gonna do all that work, might as well just get the vaccine. Like, to do all the work to get tested just to go to a concert, and to think about this, like, if you go to a concert, you have to make sure that like it's within like the week. So it's like you gotta plan time to go to. Actually, you gotta do it before then, because it's gonna take about a week to get back. So you gotta plan 2 weeks ahead to take this test. And granted, you can get it a week after.
Oh, so now they're doing. So wait, just to clarify, they're making you show a COVID test at the door at certain concerts.
Yeah. So like some places, it's like you can show your vaccination card. I think the mandate now is that you just have to like have the vaccination card, like New York.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, like for example with Wyclef, it was like you either show a vaccination card or a test, a test that proves that you don't have it, right?
Yeah.
Or we'll
And
test you on the spot within
yeah.
the first hour. But I think about it like in terms of time, oh, I hit the mic. In terms of time, uh the time it takes to get a test back, you could have gotten it within that time frame,
Right.
So like the test might say you're positive, like that it's negative and that you don't have it, but you could be going to that concert and totally be carrying.
Right. And so here's I mean, there, like I said, there's a million different, outcomes and possibilities. It's just at this point, it's just like the ultimate courtesy. Well, one of the biggest considerations that you have to take in as well is that a lot of these restaurants and venues that these events are taking place, at least for the local level of music, like they've been through actual hell this past year with having to be shut down, with how much staff they could have inside their place, with how many customers. So now at this point, like I think that it's just a courtesy call to the restaurant owners and the venue owners as well, because of the fact that it's like, hey, like we're not going to get you shut down. We're not going to get your staff infected. We're not going to get your, we're not going to, just affect your place of business. Because one of the biggest things that I have seen is that, within the restaurant industry right now, I think there's a giant problem, and a lot of non-for-profit organizations are having this issue where that help like small mom and pop restaurants and family owned restaurants, is the fact that they can't find wait staff or bartenders, and there is a huge imbalance in that industry right now. So if that's what it takes to make people feel safe to go back to work and help a local business, like I don't get what the problem is.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it comes back to people wanting all the benefits without any of the price it takes to get those benefits. It's like
Right.
they want to be able to have their cake and eat it too, but you got to realize that, there's a cost to it.
Right. And we've seen like these giant festivals like Lollapalooza is back this year. I know Izu is going to be back this year as well. I know that there are, these giant festivals and concerts coming out with basically full capacity. I don't think that there's limits on tickets from what I have heard.
Yeah, I mean, for example, I think back in June, was it June? Yeah. Foo Fighters had the first show in MSG, full capacity. You know, we're back. As as they said, New York is back, baby. But like, there's a cost to it. That's why they have this mandate now, because it's like we want to make sure New York stays back. So it's like, here's what we got to do. We got to make sure that if you want to go out and enjoy New York, you got to be prepared to deal with New York consequences. It's like, show your vaccination card.
Empire-sized consequences.
Yes.
I think I saw it on NJ.com. 20 out of 21 counties in the state of New Jersey are recommending that you wear masks inside. And again, so to anybody that's listening to this, we release episodes like a week or two ahead. So some of these stats could change. We will post in our show notes links to the specific articles that I spoke about, which were, Broadway mandating masks, the state of New York now mandating vaccination cards at events and indoor gatherings. And we will post all that stuff. But again, just bear with us that if you're listening to us from the future, this was recorded at a certain point in time. And Chrome. I don't know. Does it make you excited though, as a musician, to know that things are, opening, but opening with caution?
Yes, it does make me excited. I'm actually prepping for a couple shows. Like, it's basically the month of hi-fi band for us. This September we're booked for shows 3 out of the 4
So what are the
weeks.
shows that you got coming up?
So we got one on the 4th in Claremont Distillery, so we're back there. Then I believe the following week we have we're
The 4th of what? September?
September, yeah, September
Okay.
4th. Then literally the next week. So these are all Saturday gigs? Yeah, Saturday. So the next Saturday we're playing in Overpeck Park. And then the following one we're playing for the grand opening of I believe the School of Rock in Waldwick. The lead singer works there, so she got us a gig there. So pretty much we got gigs 3 out of the 4 weeks of September. Please check it out, guys. Hopefully this does not come out before after that. And then in October, I'm planning my first adult vacation.
Let's go. Where?
Yeah. Well, it's nothing fancy. I'm finishing those personal projects I was talking about. So I'm pulling a Bruce Springsteen and renting out a house and turning it into a studio and finishing these personal projects. But I planned it the same week that after I finished recording the project for 5 days straight, that Friday of October, I'm going to Comic-Con, which I'm very excited about. My inner nerd is like, yeah, Comic-Con.
New York Comic Con is back this year, really?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Same restrictions. So, the way it was done this year is that you couldn't buy a weekend pass. You had to buy it for each individual day, to make sure that enough people got to go to each day, because there is slight limitations on how many people can be in the Javits Center. So
Yeah.
it's not going to be as packed, which I'm kind of fine with, because social anxiety be up the wazoo at Comic-Con, but it's like enjoyable.
I understand that. Comic-Con is just like you're literally on top of each other, and it's not like regular on top of each other. It's like everybody's sweaty, everybody's hot, everybody's trying to avoid everybody else's costume, like knocking a wing off or something. So like
everyone should go to Comic-Con this year as either A, a Power Ranger, or B, a Stormtrooper. That's just it. Like,
yeah, mask.
Easiest way to stay masked up. But and then the next day I'm catching one of my favorite bands, Switchfoot, in concert at Pier 17. So I'm extremely excited about that. It is going to be an outdoor show. So I'm going to try and be up in front because that's one of my favorite bands. I got a general admission ticket. So, I'm going to be there early to try and get up in front. But I'm very excited for things to be opening up again because I'm excited to be playing shows. I'm excited to be catching shows and going to events like this. I am fully vaccinated, so these are the benefits that you get from getting fully vaccinated. You can go to these events and, for the most part, be assured that everyone else there is also vaccinated. So, uh,
Yeah.
that's I feel like that's also one of the benefits is like with the whole mandate is that it ensures that that everyone around you is also okay, because I think that's very much what kept a lot of people very unsure of things because
Right.
it's like I know I'm taking care of myself, but I don't trust other people. And so doing it kind of this way, at least for New York events, uh kind of puts the doubts out of my head. Like, oh, what if a person comes and isn't vaccinated, whatever? Like, New York's like, haha, putting a stop to that right now.
Right. So, we're over our time at this point, but it was lovely talking to you and getting to know, what projects you've been up to, what you feel as, a musician to be performing in front of all these people that are strangers. And it's just good to know your opinions as someone who's out there working that job,
Yeah,
that gig.
this has been awesome talking about all this because, there's not a lot of like outlets to talk about certain topics. So it's like, it's good that, you guys give a platform for musicians and creatives to just talk about certain things and just talk about the world of what it means to be a creative and kind of dealing with all that in this time.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Gigless podcast. We give it to you 100% straight. There's no foo-foo around here. It's straight up. We really do care about all of our guests and all of our guests' families and friends. So please, if you can, go get vaccinated. Go find out more information on the CDC website. Call up your healthcare provider. This is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form by any, third-party entity. This is me, Remi, telling you 100% straight up. It sucks to see a child in the hospital and being sick over something that you can't control. It sucks to see an elderly person. It sucks to see any type of loved one in the hospital and you can't control their outcome. And over the last few days, I've just been reading horror stories from people that I followed in the artistic community. And let me just tell you this. Go get vaccinated because all the stories share the same ending, that they all wish that they got the vaccine. And by the time they got put on the hospital bed, the nurse was like, it's too late for that right now. So seriously, go get vaccinated.
My interjection on that is just everybody take care of themselves.
Yeah.
In general, make sure you're, irregardless of vaccinated or unvaccinated, just
take your vitamins.
Make sure you're taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally. I know that throughout this whole time, it's not been easy for a lot of people. So just focus on, staying mentally sharp and also keeping yourself physically healthy. I know that sleep schedules have been kind of non-existent during this time, so make sure you get in some sleep, people.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, Dane, take us out.
Thank you for listening to the Gigless podcast, hosted by Remi Ludwig and produced by Dane Wagner. The song used in our intro and outro is Beach Walk by Unicorn Heads. If you enjoyed this podcast, head over to our social media pages on Instagram at Gigless Podcast and our website, giglesspodcastblog.wordpress.com. There you can find out more about the artist, contact the host and producer, and find out more about our schedule. Thank you.